Okay, good evening, everybody. Whoever's got the speakers on, could you turn them off, please? No, that's 1 second. Sorry, everybody. Now, just because it's my first meeting, there's no need to do like this. Okay, we're still there's an evil laugh there, but okay, we're off. Fantastic. Look, good evening, everybody. Welcome and to the Western Area Planning Committee meeting, especially those members of the public in attendance, ex-officers and members of the public present in the building. My name's Adrian Abbs. I'm the new chairman of Western Area Planning. So please bear with me this evening, and this is my first one. So if I make some mistakes, I'm sure the officers will help me out, but we shouldn't have too many problems, I hope. Members here with us this evening are Councillor Phil Barnett, Councillor Dennis Bennyworth, Councillor Patrick Clark, Councillor Heather Codling, Councillor Caroline Culver, Councillor Tony Vickers, Councillor Howard Wollaston, and Councillor Clive Hooker is the Vice Chair for this evening, or Vice Chair for Western Area Planning, not just for this evening. The following officers are attending to advise and support the meeting. We have Mr. Simon Till, who's the team leader for Western Area Planning Committee, Mr. Mazi Miziwi, who's the Senior Planning Officer, Ms. Cheyenne Kirby, another Senior Planning Officer, Ms. Cheyenne Kutz, the Senior Planning Officer, Mr. Paul Goddard, our Highways Officer, Mr. Russell Davidson, our Senior Scientific Officer, which I believe is joining us virtually. I'm pretty sure he's doing that. Mrs. Kim Mayer, who was my legal advisor on my left here, Mr. Jack Karimi, the clerk, close enough? Correct me later. And Ms. Lizzie Reeves, who's looking after us as our Zoom host this evening. Before we start this evening's meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including impartiality and Sorry, what was that? Anything important? No, I'm going to move on then. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful to other views. I'm sure we do that anyway. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. That'll be via the emergency exit in the corner of the room there. Please proceed via the safety emergency exit route and follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is in the Dolphin Pub car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, please remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? No? So moving on to the agenda first, are there any apologies this evening? I believe not.
We've received no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. And second item on the agenda is the minutes of the last two meetings. The first meeting to look at is the 1st of March. And do I have any comments from any members about these meeting minutes? Okay, could I have a proposer and a seconder? That's Councillor Vickers and Councillor Barnett has seconded that. In that case, I'm happy to sign, which, oh, yep, sorry, thank you very much. Could I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Any objections? No abstentions, I believe. Okay, good. Just bear with me 1 second. And the second meeting was on the 25th of May, 2023. Again, does anybody have any comments? Oh, I seriously doubt it on that one. But, could I have a proposer and a second then, please? Councillor Benowith and Councillor
No,
Alderston seconded.
Excuse me, I think
Oh, sorry.
I'm thinking I'm down as being vice chairman. I'm not.
No, we on the update sheet, it was corrected.
So I missed the update sheet. I'm
No,
sorry.
no problem.
I'll second this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
you.
much indeed. Could I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Okay, that's everybody, so don't need to do the rest. Thank you very much. All right, item 3 are declarations of interest. Or anybody like to declare any on the subjects before us this evening? Councillor Benowith.
Thank you, Chairman. All 3 of these applications are in my ward. I've had very little or no lobbying from the people involved. And I will be looking at each application this evening on its merits and coming to my decision based on that.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers. May I ask members to use the microphone when speaking, please?
Sorry, all 3 applications are now in my ward, although they weren't at the time they were submitted. But I have had conversations with people, which I suppose could be construed as lobbying over the past months, but I will, I feel able to speak and vote in this. I don't believe I'm prejudiced other than having had some conversations.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. So moving on to item, before we do that, yes. Members, I would like to propose a change to the order in which we're going to look at the applications this evening. We have 2 applications where we have members of the public. The one we were about to move on to do with Owen Farm, and then one to do with a clear up exercise for 2 houses. I'd like to take those 2 first and move what was going to be the second to the end, because that is a contractual change rather than affecting people. Could I have a proposal or any Councillor Vickers and Councillor Clark seconded? Could a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Okay, that's what we'll do then. So moving on to item 4, which actually remains the same in this case. For those of you who are new to this meeting, let me try to briefly explain the procedure. Officers will present the application to the committee, after which the following groups might wish to make representations for up to a maximum of 5 minutes. The order of that will be the parish/town council representatives, objectors, supporters, the applicant and or their agent, and then ward members. I should be clear that 5 minutes is the total for any one of those groups to speak. So if there are multiple ward members, they would share the 5 minutes. If there are multiple objectors, they would share the 5 minutes, and so on. Are we all clear on the way the meeting will proceed? Thank you. Following this, the committee members will have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the speakers and officers. The committee will then debate the item before determining the application. There are 3 applications on the agenda this evening, and that's the first one we will be looking at is Owen Farm. So starting with the first application, the Senior Planning Officer, Mr. Mizawi, will do a presentation for us to kick us off. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have an update sheet on the application, which includes 1 additional impartial representation from a member of the public. Comments are with regard to drainage, and these are listed in the update report. The update sheet also addresses points raised by committee members, including a commentary on the application of policy CS15 with regard to sustainability. Members, today at around lunchtime, we received a letter of objection from Natural England on the application. A supplementary update sheet has been issued this afternoon with comments from Natural England attached. I hope everyone's got that. The points raised were regarding the use of urban rates for the yard and built areas, the use of green space rates for gallops and pasture areas, and the collection of the manure and liquid waste. The Council's ecologist, Phil Lomax, is available tonight, and he's going to explain a little bit more about the letter that we've received this afternoon. Phil, are you there?
Yes, good evening. Sorry, Mercy, I was waiting for the chair to call on me. Ladies and gentlemen, just by way of quick introduction, I'm an ecologist. I'm currently employed on a temporary contract for West Berkshire Council, and particularly with reference to trying to find ways of delivering nutrient neutrality for development within the Lambourne catchment.
Phil, could you hang on one moment while we get your face on the screen? Just could you, unless you're going to do some slides, Phil, or you? Oh, okay. We're going to have to carry on as we were, I think. Sorry. Please carry back to where you were. The box is going to be too small, apparently. Oh, no, there we go.
Are you happy for me to continue, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
So my background is I've been a professional ecologist for over 40 years, including working for many local authorities and in fact for Natural England, who have lodged the objection today to the application for Arnhem Farm. I will try not to get into too much technical detail, but just to inform members that because the application results in export loads of phosphorus above the current baseline levels, we were required to undertake a habitats regulation assessment of the development under what's called Regulation 63 of the Habitats Regulations 2017. I undertook that habitats regulation assessment on behalf of the local planning authority, and my conclusions were that the development would not result in any adverse effect on the integrity of the River Lambourne SAC. Natural England has challenged that conclusion on a couple of grounds, and having had the opportunity to study their comments today, I'm confident that we can answer those and satisfy Natural England. My first point I would raise is that having worked for Natural England, it is very unusual for Natural England to raise an objection where they are also simultaneously requiring further information for clarification on something. Normally, under those circumstances, Natural England officers would not state an objection, but request further information for clarification before finalising its position. It's strange in this case that having sought further information, Natural England has also stated that it has an objection. That's quite unusual in my experience. But the objections, or the basis of the objections, are based on misunderstandings. And I'm absolutely sure that we can clarify with Natural England what those misunderstandings are and provide them with satisfactory reassurance that this development can proceed without any adverse effect on the integrity of the River Lambourne SAC. And I'm very happy to answer any questions which you, Chair, or members of the committee may have.
Well, we're not now, though. Thank you. We'll come back to that later. Mr. Mazzoui, do you wish to resume now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. There we go.
Right, here we go. Members, this application is for full planning permission for the change of use of the land and buildings from agricultural use to an equine facility. As indicated in the report and as viewed by members on site, the proposal includes part implemented developments as well as fully retrospective developments. The change of use is for creation of 45, for the accommodation of 45 horses, including installation of associated car park, all stormwater and drainage, landscaping, installation of new entrance gates, vehicular access and gallops. These elements are partly implemented. The proposal also includes the refurbishment of existing buildings, demolition of an existing hay barn, erection of a new stable building, a horse walker and a lunch pen. These elements are fully retrospective. The application was called in by the ward member. There are 5 letters of objection, 5 letters received, 1 of objection and 4 impartial. And the officer recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is for approval, subject to the schedule of conditions and subject to comments from Natural England with regards to the habitats regulation assessment and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement as set out in the heads of terms within the report. The next slide just shows the constraints map for the site. The application outline or the red line can be seen, it's in blue in this slide. Some of the constraints can be seen. There's a public rights of way footpath which runs in a south-westerly direction, which is this one here. And there's also a Roman road, which is part of the historic record, which dissects the site, which is this line here. On the left of your slide is the nutrients neutrality catchment zone. The dot indicates the site, and the River Lambourne is also illustrated to give an idea of the location. As indicated, the site is Onam Farm, which is also known as Upper Farm. It has approximately 55 hectares. However, only the land within the red line, as outlined on the screen in blue, will be changed from agriculture to equine use. The existing main entrance is to the northwest, which is this location here, off High Street, which is a link road between the B4000, which is this road here, and Lambourne Road, which is in this location. The nearest adjoining properties are to the southeast and northeast of the site, namely High Street Farm in this location and Southfields in this location. There are properties as part of Onam Village, which are located just in this location here. As indicated in the report, the application has been delayed mainly due to the River Lambourne nutrient neutrality designation, which was received from Natural England and the government on the 16th of March, 2022. In terms of the proposal itself, Mr. Chairman, as indicated, it involves the installation of new entrance gates within the existing vehicular access of the High Street, which is this area 4 marked here. There's also proposed new parking provision for 21 parking spaces for staff and guests located in this location. The proposal includes the installation and refurbishment of the existing buildings on site. So these buildings, barns 2 to 4, were proposed to be converted, and barn 1 is a new build after the removal of the existing A barn. On this plan or slide, you can see the proposed car parking spaces. The proposal is for 45 horses, and the existing farmhouse, which is located to the far left, is hidden by the I think the other pictures, but the existing farmhouse will remain unchanged, and it will be used as a heads lad's house for the facility itself. The proposal also includes extensive landscaping. We are in the AONB, and the landscaping plan has been included in the pack. This slide just indicates those proposals. I'll just go through the proposed plans. As indicated, there is a proposal for a new vet stable area, feed store, rug room, and 5 stables, as indicated by this illustration of the plans for barn 2. There is also a proposal for barn 4 to convert it to proposed offices and owner's room for meetings. The next slide shows barn 3, which includes a proposed lads room, colours room, and tack room, as indicated on the slide. The next slide shows the large proposed stables barn. This will accommodate 40 loose boxes, and the other 5 are, as I indicated on the previous slides. The next slide indicates the proposed lunch pen and horse walker and paddocks. As you can see, there's the horse walker and the proposed paddocks. Next slide indicates proposed deep sand arena, rolling circles, and the warm-up area. And the next slide indicates the proposed entrance gates to the site off High Street. As indicated, members, the site is located in the rural part of West Berkshire within the AONB. Policy ADPP1 allows for limited development within the countryside, focused on addressing identified needs and maintaining a strong rural economy. Policy ADPP5 defines development within the North Wessex Downs AONB, and the policy supports equestrian and racehorse industry development, which are recognized as contributing to both the local and national economy. Policy ADPP5 also states that equestrian industry and the racehorse industry will continue to be supported as nationally and locally important part of the district's economy. The Jockey Club were consulted on the application, and they've indicated that they would support the proposal on the basis of creating training facilities to help strengthen and sustain the wider racing industry. A landscape visual impact assessment has been submitted and reviewed by officers. The sensitivity of the site from various visual receptors was limited by the tall and mature trees, which I'm sure members would have seen on site, and hedges either located within the site itself or within the local countryside and the boundary edge. The general approach taken is to create a scheme with single-story buildings using traditional designs and forms, Officers consider that there are elements of urbanizing effects from the proposal. However, these are considered low impact and functional within the countryside context. Additionally, the proposed tree planting and landscaping has been increased on the development's edges, which will reduce the visibility of the development. There are small number of residential properties that border the site, mainly to the eastern edges. However, these properties are located a fair distance, and officers consider there will be limited impact in terms of noise and disturbance. Any potential noise from, for example, the horse walker in terms of machinery and equipment has been conditioned in the report. The highways officers have no objections subject to conditions recommended. Condition 14 in the pack ensures that access to the site by horse-related vehicles and other larger vehicles, including horse-related service, delivery, articulated vehicles, shall be via the high street entrance only. The condition also states that none of these vehicles shall access the site from the Onam village side secondary access. This was one of the concerns raised by local residents and the parish council. The local lead flood authority has reviewed the submitted details and they are content with the condition, which requests for additional information to be submitted. The nutrient neutrality officer has indicated that the production of horse waste from the stabling of 45 horses will result in significant nutrient loads, and the habitats regulation assessment is attached to the report at Appendix 1 and has been published to the public website as well. The nutrients officer is content that the nutrient management strategy is satisfactory, and the LPA would advocate for the development. However, this approach is subject to the management strategy being made the subject of a Section 106 legal agreement, which would incorporate the management strategy. And this regulations assessment being approved by Natural England, we have obviously touched on this at the beginning of the presentation. I will now just go quickly through the site photographs, Mr. Chairman. This next slide just shows the view of the High Street entrance. This is before the work had commenced on site. As indicated, this is a partly implemented scheme, part of the scheme. This next slide shows the existing farmhouse to your right and farm buildings from the Onam village entrance. This view is of the Onam village entrance to the site, which has been referred to as the secondary site entrance. And this is the site that we're restricting access to the dwelling only. A view of the site from the secondary site entrance again. This shows the public rights of way footpath at the secondary access. It begins just on there. The next slide shows views into the site from the public rights of way footpath, showing the existing buildings or the former buildings now, and just to show context. The next slide shows the former building 3, which as members would have seen on site, has been converted into a lads room, colors room and tack room. And the current buildings are shown as built on the slide. This shows, the next slide shows former building 2. Before the works and after as existing and as built. It shows the new vet stable area building and it will also accommodate 5 stables. The next slide shows the former hay barn before it was demolished, and to your right is the now built stables barn. The next slide shows the building 4 as formerly existing, and to your right it shows the converted building for offices and owner's room. The next slide shows the horse walker, which is to your right, and the lunch pen. The fencing on the slide indicates the proposed paddocks. The next slide shows the proposed parking area, partially implemented. The parking will be going in this area here. This slide shows the proposed sand rolling circles and warm-up area as built. The next slide just shows the proposed gallops, again as built and partially implemented. The last slide indicates the proposed buildings is viewed from the High Street site entrance, just to give context in terms of the impact of the development. That's the end of the presentation, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazzari. Mr. Gardard, do you wish to add any comments at all?
Can do, Chairman. Thank you. My colleague, Massi Misawa, has described the site in detail and the proposal. The main access to the site is via the High Street. The access complies to all the council standards with regards to width and sight lines in both directions onto the High Street. And I would recommend that the access is more than suitable for the expected number of vehicle movements. At the busiest time of the year during horse racing season, we could expect some 16 vehicles in and 16 vehicles out per day. Of those vehicles, the largest expected would be 3.5 tonne horse boxes and some 7.5 tonne lorries for deliveries. Therefore, I can assure the committee that no vehicle greater in size than 7.5 tonnes is expected to visit the site. My colleague Massi Misawa mentioned the secondary access via Onham Lane to the east, which, as has been mentioned, is not suitable due to its width, etc., for much increases in traffic. And therefore, we have applied the condition that Massi described in your pack there that limits use of this access. The parking and site layout is considered acceptable, and therefore, with all of that, your highway officers have no objection to this proposal, subject to the conditions in your main report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gardard. Now we're going to move on to our speakers on the application. And I guess the first one this evening is the parish and town representatives. Do I believe Councillor Cole, is that yourself? No. Who's it? Town, parish or town? Ah, right. Okay. Is anybody here from the parish or town council? No. Okay. Moving next on to the objectors. Are there any objectors here this evening, please? No, I can't say it. So it is you, Councillor Cole, after all. So, just one moment, please, just while I stop the stopwatch. You know you have 5 minutes, right? Okay. Away you go.
Good evening, members. This application arrived in October 2021. I have called it in 24th of November 2021.
Wow.
Deadline date for calling. Couldn't wait.
Sorry, Mr.
One moment. Could you check your microphone is on, please? There we go. Thank you.
The issues for the residents to the east were resolved. A new permissive path was duly negotiated with Sutton Estates. It's recorded on page 25 of your agenda and elsewhere therein. Boxford Parish withdrew its objections in January 2022, so there was therefore no reason for this to remain called in. But of course, I was not permitted to withdraw the call-in. As a very brief aside, to my mind, this one is a good example of why a member should be permitted to withdraw a call-in. It's not the first time I've suggested this. And I take this opportunity to publicly request that such be considered to avoid more wastage of public money. I'm well aware of the reasons for not agreeing such a change, and I'm also aware they could be got around perfectly well. To return to the application, I'm very pleased to see that officers are now in favour of it. That the Natural England objection is based on misunderstandings, as your ecology officer has stated. Therefore, members, I can only ask you to dot whatever I's need to be dotted in respect of the section 106 and put it through. I do realise that there will be unhappiness about the fact that some of this is retrospective. But this application has been strung out over an unbelievable length of time. And frankly, only some of that can be put down to the nutrient neutrality issue. I ask you, please, to now regularise this, put through this application. This one is good for Boxford in terms of potential employment. It's good for Newbury in terms of the racehorse industry. It's a good conversion of some of the existing buildings. It does not damage the AONB. To me, more trees are a good thing. And you have a biodiversity net gain of 10%. It's a good use of this piece of land. Thank you, members, for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Moving on to members, does anybody have any questions of Councillor Cole? Phil, Councillor Barnett.
Welcome, Councillor Cole. Good to see you in another position tonight. You used the word misunderstanding, and of course, Mr. Lomax did as well. Would you like to sort of clarify that in greater depth, please?
Not really. I can only repeat what has been said to me, which is that the information that they've based that on is out of date. You may wish to clarify that further yourself.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Culver.
Good evening, James. Nice to see you. You mentioned that it's a good use of the buildings, but would you not agree that turning a building that was 315 square metres into one that's 973 is quite a large increase? And as you will be aware, as a previous member of this committee, we tend to look unkindly upon people changing the footprint in the AONB by such a large margin.
I'm just looking to see what I said, but I think you'll find I said it's a good conversion of some of the existing buildings. With respect.
Councillor Hooker.
Good evening, James, and nice to see you back. 2019, long time ago. I can't remember exactly what was on the drawings at that stage. Maybe you can remind me, were they then as they are now?
I couldn't possibly tell you. It's so long ago.
Yeah, it's not really a point of clarification either, Councillor Hooker. So thank you there. Anybody else? No, in that case, thank you very much for your representation.
Thank you.
Okay, next we move on to the applicant and or agent. I see the applicants with us. So yes, please. Same thing. You get 5 minutes. Are you speaking by yourself or is anybody helping you?
Just me, please.
Okay, dokie. Away you go.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of the planning application for my new yard. My name is Harry Derham. I've been in horse racing my whole life. I started working for 14 times champion trainer Paul Nicholls for the first 11 years of my career, 3 as a professional jockey and for 6 years as his assistant. Having invested my life savings into my new business and had my first runner in my own name on the 26th of December 2022 at Huntingdon, which was a winner. Since then, I've trained 14 winners operating at a 25% strike rate, enjoying a runner at the both Cheltenham and Aintree festivals. Since September last year, I've been working out of a rented facility in Lambourne. However, with the economic challenges trainers face, working with just 20 horses renting a small yard is not financially sustainable, hence the urgent need for this new facility. Without it, I will likely face the near impossible decision to have to give up on my dream, such is the financial pressure. Horse racing, as you know, is a thrilling sport, but also an industry that contributes significantly to the local economy and creates numerous job opportunities. The economic benefits of a horse racing yard cannot be overstated. The establishment of a new yard will generate a ripple effect through the local economy, stimulating growth and creating employment opportunities. Me, the trainer, stable staff, grooms, and other support personnel will all find work in this thriving industry, which in a rural economy is absolutely vital. I already have a team of people who rely on me for their source of income to feed their families. Another benefit of a racing yard is that they can be instrumental in promoting equestrian activities among the youth, providing them with opportunities to learn and engage in a healthy and fulfilling pastime. It is important to note that the horse racing is an industry that places great emphasis on the welfare and care of the horses involved. Rigorous standards and regulations are in place to ensure the well-being of these animals. This planning application outlines the measures to provide spacious, well-maintained stables, ample exercise areas and veterinary facilities. By supporting this application, we contribute to upholding these high standards and the ethical treatment of these magnificent animals that I love so dearly and I've spent my life caring for. In conclusion, this is more than just a place for horses to train and compete. It represents our heritage, contributes to the local economy, fosters social connections, and upholds the welfare of our horses. By approving this application, we demonstrate our commitment to preserving an integral part of our culture and sporting legacy, while also paving the way for economic growth and community development in a county that is so encouraging of equestrian businesses. When I started on this venture, to me, it was glaringly obvious that West Berks was the place to set up this business. Such was your reputation for supporting people in the racing community. I am confident in my ability to train horses to a high standard, and I absolutely believe that in time, I can make this yard a facility and a business that this county can be extremely proud of. To that end, the very future of my business and career depends on this decision. Thank you all for your attention, and I urge you to support this planning application for my yard.
Thank you very much. Plenty of time to spare. So over to members, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Derham. Racing isn't something that I particularly enjoy, but I have no wish to do anything but the best for your industry. And I'm glad to see from the buildings that we saw on the pictures, the officer showed some improvements to the built environment. My question really is about the rest of the land. You are only using a small proportion of the agricultural fields. We need food production. We are facing food insecurity in this country. We need other forms of employment in the countryside as well. So what's going to happen to the land that you now own, presumably, which is not part of your racing? And how are you going to get things like access to agricultural use to that quite large area, which I wouldn't want to see just with no use at all?
I don't own the land. The land is owned by the Sutton Estate. We have a good relationship with the Sutton Estate, and we're working together to ensure that the farmland is kept appropriately.
Okay, I'll direct my questions to Sutton Estate some other time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let that one go because it's actually something I was interested in the answer to as well. But is there any other members that would like to ask a question? No? Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So finally, we move on to ward members. So any of the ward members, some of which are present, wish to take? Oh,
Chairman, do you want me to take a stand?
one moment, please.
He's in the Zoom, but I believe he wasn't speaking, was available for questions.
Well, there is 1 minute and 30 seconds left of the 5 minutes for the applicant or agent. Do they wish to speak? Can we bring them into the Zoom meeting, please? If they're present, or anything to add? It's a bit odd. I would like to have known before we went on to members' questions, but.
Can I just add something? I have registered to speak.
Yes, of course, if you're registered to speak, yeah.
Only the fact that.
Could you come to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Steve Woodward. I'm the project manager on the site. I'd just like to say.
Just put it again, just remind there's 1 minute and 30 seconds left.
Okay, I'll be very
off you
brief.
go.
My only thing is the buildings, as you can see, we've completed most of them now. I think we've done them in character to what they were before. You question about the building being slightly larger than what it was. I think that we need that size building to house 40 stables, and with that type building, it means that the staff and the horses can be inside out of the weathers, because it is very harsh, the weather up there. So rather than having individual stables,
1 minute to go.
we would prefer to have the American barn type, which means that you have the stables in one building, which is easier for staff and horses. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We do have the agent in the Zoom meeting now. Does the agent wish to use up the last 45 seconds?
Yes, please. That would be lovely. Thank you. In essence, we're all very pleased that after nearly a couple of years of this application being considered, West Berkshire Planning Department are recommending approval after numerous specialist reports having been conducted. We've reviewed the officer's report and we're happy with the conditions. So if the members are minded to approve the application this evening, that's all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So back to members for questions on the last two speakers. Any takers, members? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for the representation. So we'll now move on to the ward members. Do any ward members wish to speak this evening? Okay, to take the lectern, please, Councillor Vickers.
Right.
Yes, Councillor Benevert.
Councillor Vickers is going to the lectern. I'm also a ward member. I think probably reserve my right and save it for the debate, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you for letting us know.
Thank you.
Just before I start, Chairman, you've set the clock, I know. This doesn't prevent me from contributing to the debate. I'm just making some remarks about what I've learned from reading the reports as the ward member from the people that I now represent. It's just,
which you are perfectly entitled to do, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. Thank you. In the old days, we used to have to come to the lectern, but there we are. We're in a new environment, aren't we? I just want to say that, as you know, Chairman, rights of way and access to the countryside are something I regard as very important. And I was alerted to the fact there were some objectors to the impact on the rights of way and access to High Street. I just would like to know, when we come to the debate, whether the permissive right which the landowner is allowed is something that can be conditioned, or whether it is entirely irrelevant. But I'm glad to know that the landowner is allowing access across the land, which is not going to be on the final definitive map, but nevertheless is an improvement to access to the countryside. Apart from that, having passed up and down High Street many times, and indeed along the Lambourne Road at the bottom, although I was kind of aware there was a planning application, it didn't impose upon views from outside whatsoever. So that hasn't been referred to, but I can reassure members having been around that area quite a lot in recent months, that this will have no impact on views from anywhere else in the AONB, and I'm glad about that. Thank you, Chairman.
You could just stay there just in case other members have questions, please, Councillor Lucas. Do any of the members have questions? No, thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're now going to move on to clarification from the officers. And Councillor Bennyworth, are you first up?
Thank you, Chairman. If I can ask Mr. Masiwa, Mr. Masiwa, this is a former dairy farm. If I were to win the next Euro Millions or lottery, whenever that might be, and be in a position to buy Odham Farm, and I was minded to put cattle back on that, is there anything that would stop me from doing that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bennyworth. Yes, I mean, if the current application proposes the change of use of the land and the buildings to equine use, it's been implemented. So if members are minded to approve, there would be a requirement for change of use back to agriculture. And the necessary development to accommodate that new use. Yes, but the answer to your question, yes, it would be possible to change it back. It just depends with what use would be required and what development would be required at the site to accommodate the agricultural use.
I was looking at the, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Councillor Till. So I would like to just jump in for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can understand the line of questioning, Councillor, and the answer to the question is that if tomorrow all activity in respect of this planning application was to cease, the authorised use of the land is agricultural at present. So if a farmer wanted to go and graze cattle on that land, then that would be perfectly in accordance with the authorised use.
Mr. Till, thank you very much. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Bennyworth? Or no? Good. Did I see a hand, Councillor Vickers?
Yes, it's a similar question, but posing a different scenario to officers. Assuming this does go ahead and we have a successful racehorse trainers establishment, but we have, as was mentioned in my question to the applicant, some land that is remaining in agricultural use. Is there anything in the development, for example, in terms of the fencing or access roads to the remainder of the land that would need to be looked at again and modified, or would perhaps make it harder for a reasonable range of agricultural uses to be made of the rest of the land? Has that been looked at?
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. We obviously considered the proposal as submitted and before members. I mean, there are some permanent infrastructure which have been implemented on the site, which will likely prevent any future use of the land. For example, the horse walker, lounge areas. But as I indicated earlier, once the uses or the change of use of the land has been implemented, it doesn't stop another application to revert the land. And it doesn't stop some of that infrastructure being removed. As also, just to add with the presentation, we indicated that not all the land is being converted to equine use. So I think the majority of the land is actually being retained as agricultural use. And as indicated, or probably members saw on site, there are access gates to some of these fields from the access, for example. And I think as the applicant indicated, it's something that they can sort of, I think, resolve in terms of having agricultural use.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hooker.
Chairman. Mr. Masawa, again, I'm going back to my question of casting your mind back to 2019 when this application was put in. And I'm going to refer to the hay barn. Now, what I'm looking for clarification on is on the original application on the renovation or rebuild of the hay barn in 2019, whether a size was stipulated. On the site meeting in which we were all there and you heard Mr. Woodard inform us that there was storm damage and the barn was taken down and reconstructed. And the drawings that we've had submitted today show the reconstructed barn. So has there been a change from the original application of the footprint of the original hay barn and that we're looking at now?
Thank you.
With retrospective application.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Yes, the original application proposed the removal of the hay barn and the construction of the new stable barn, which was a new building. The other buildings on the site were proposed to be converted and refurbished. As you correctly say, the applicants did indicate to us that there was some storm damage to the buildings, and this precipitated the works to those buildings. Just coming back to the hay barn, yes, the hay barn was initially proposed to be removed, and the proposal was for the construction of a larger barn for the stables, and that is still as proposed before members.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. As ward member for Lambourne, I'm obviously supportive of the racing industry, but I am concerned about the potential for light pollution. I see in the report 6.75 that the strategy is for downlighting effectively down the walls. I just want to find out whether there's any risk of upward light pollution, as it were, from the top of the barns.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the lighting is an important matter in the AONB, and it's also quite key in terms of biodiversity and protected species. We have attached a condition as well to limit external lighting, just because of the location and the impact of upward lighting, as you rightfully indicate. Yes, the proposal is for downward lighting, and at this, as proposed, officers are comfortable with the proposed lighting, and as indicated, the condition limits any further lighting proposed.
Thank you.
Any other members? If not, I have Carol O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a question for Mr. Lomax with regard to the letter from Natural England. He mentioned that he was satisfied that what they'd said could be incorporated into our permission and conditions. Can I just seek clarification where it talks about the need to, it talks about nutrient loading for the yard and built area should be revisited. How does Mr. Lomax envisage us covering that off when it comes to the permission and the conditions, should we give permission this evening?
Good evening, Councillor. The first thing I have to say is that I don't agree with the comments that have been made by the Natural England officer. I did earlier on say that I'd actually worked for Natural England myself, and so I have undertaken this habitats regulation assessment, what I think in a very thorough manner, using all the available information that we have available to us from the applicants, and we have sought clarification on a number of matters from the applicants before I even put pen to paper on writing the habitats regulation assessment. So I consider it to be very robust and very thorough. And I don't agree, therefore, with the comments and the objection that we've received from Natural England. From my reading of the objection, I can see that there are a number of misunderstandings, and the misunderstandings are largely around the drainage system and how the drainage system will function. And that is because, unfortunately, in the letter of objection, Natural England is referencing a drainage scheme from the year 2021, when in fact we've had other iterations of the drainage scheme, and we now have one that's 2023, and which is the one obviously that members are being asked to consider as part of this application now, the updated drainage scheme. And just to try and explain, the critical thing that has to happen with the drainage scheme is that the contaminated wastewater has to be separated out from rainfall. We cannot have contaminated water, for example, from the stable floors and the yards draining into the ground, because then all the phosphorus from that contaminated water would end up in the groundwater and would end up in the River Lambourne. That is something we obviously need to avoid. And we have agreed a drainage system whereby all the contaminated wastewater goes to an underground cesspool. And from there it is collected by tanker, and it is taken away to a licensed wastewater treatment facility and disposed of outside the Lambourne catchment. So in other words, we have got a system of dealing with contaminated wastewater that effectively removes all the wastewater, not only from the application site, but also from the Lambourne catchment, so that there is no chance of any phosphorus pollution from that wastewater getting into the River Lambourne. And likewise, Councillor, we have an agreement that all the manure will also be removed from the stables and the yard on a regular basis, again by licensed waste carrier. That will be taken again, not only out of the application site, but outside of the Lambourne catchment, again to a licensed waste facility. And the applicants have submitted in support of their application and in support of this mitigation, letters from licensed waste carriers who've said they have the capacity to take this waste away, and have indicated to us the locations, the licensed locations where they would take the waste to. So in my estimation, the avoidance and mitigation measures that we have agreed with the applicants will result in no net increase in phosphorus to the ground or to the River Lambourne. I hope that helps to answer the question, Councillor, but if you've got any further queries, I'm only too happy to try and help.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lomax, for that comprehensive response. You mentioned that Natural England have based their comments on an old iteration of the drainage plan. But surely if we only asked them to comment on the 8th of June, they would have had the most recent iteration in front of them when they made their considerations.
Yes, they would. And indeed, therefore, that's why I consider that there's been a misunderstanding, because I think they've misunderstood what was the most recent version of the drainage scheme. Right.
So you think they've based it on a previous iteration?
I do, Councillor, from the reference that was made in their objection today to a Pitman drainage scheme dated 2021. We have a more up-to-date drainage scheme from ICW Wastewater Engineers, which is the scheme that we've been relying on in terms of the recommendation that's before you tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could stick around for a second, Mr. Ahmad, if you bear with me, I have a question myself related to that. How on earth did they get the Pitman report if we only sent them the one? Where have they got this bad information from? If we've not submitted it, Mr. Rumans, can you hear me? Mr. Lomax, sorry.
Yes. Sorry, Chair. I don't know. I'm at a loss to answer that question. As you will appreciate, there have been numerous amendments to the scheme from its original submission. I can only suppose, therefore, that the officers at Natural England have lost track of the number of amendments that have been made and have been looking at a document which is in fact now superseded.
Are you suggesting that they looked at our planning portal and got the information from there rather than what you submitted? Is that the supposition here?
My habitats regulation assessment on behalf of the local planning authority chair was based on all the most recent up-to-date documents, and in fact I referenced those with footnotes in the habitats regulation assessment, so that nobody should be in any doubt reading the habitats regulation assessment which documents I was relying on in making that assessment.
Okay, I'll come back for further clarification. Councillor Hooker, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question from Mr. Masawi again, and I'm looking today, obviously, at full planning. I wonder if he just could remind me. I've looked in the papers. Can you remind me if there was a pre-app for this application, and was there an outline planning application for this application?
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. No, there wasn't. There hasn't been a pre-application submission on this site, and there hasn't been any other planning application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have, Mr. Massau, I do have one question or one area which I'd like some discussion on, please, from you, or clarification. An awful lot of policies are listed out on page 25 of the pack. One that isn't there is CS15. And I would like, especially with respect to Barn 4, to understand why CS15 isn't applicable, assuming it isn't, because it's not in the report, and why it isn't applicable specifically to Barn 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated in the update sheet, there was an omission in terms of policy CS15. That was an error on officers' part. The CS15 potentially will apply to building or the proposed offices and owner's room in terms of BREEAM. But as indicated in the update sheet, officers consider that initially the application was for conversion of the buildings in their existing form, and also with the fact that the buildings have been completed, we considered that attaching a BREEAM condition might be difficult in terms of maximizing achieving BREEAM excellent. However, as indicated in the report, update report, if members wish to attach a BREEAM condition, one is suggested in the update sheet, and we would then request the details from the applicant.
Thank you very much. And the final one, and apologies, could you bring the diagram up of the parking? I can't, I'm sure it was there, I just didn't spot it because we went by in terms of EV charging. Is that not something that would be required at this stage in a development? I'm sure it's there and I just didn't see it, but if we could satisfy me, please, Mr. Gardard.
It is, and a condition has been applied.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great news. Right, are there any other questions from members? If well, one last one from Caroline Culver, then we're going to move on to debate, I think.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In 6.22, it mentions about the use of materials, and we had hoped that some of the original materials would be used. Have we got any concerns at the moment about the materials that have been used? I know that we have asked for an extra schedule of materials to be submitted, but have we got any concerns about what is already there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. No, I think in terms of the work that is taking place, officers wouldn't be concerned with the choice of materials. We consider that it's the choices of materials are in keeping with local designs and traditions. We've asked for the condition, another schedule of materials, just to ensure that we secure those and others that have been implemented on the site as a result of the rebuild.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring Mr. Till in now. We'd like to make a comment, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I would just like to return with a comment on policy CS15, if you will. There are, of course, requirements of policy CS15 that apply to buildings such as the office building on site for provision of BREEAM excellence. However, your officers do have to advise members that we do have to be mindful of the reasonableness of conditions, and that does apply to giving some weight to the fact that these works are retrospectively applied for, and therefore it may be unreasonable in itself to require the applicant to meet with the requirements of BREEAM Excellent, as this is a very high bar test that generally requires the early construction methodology for the building to be considered. Members, at the end of the day, it is to your discretion if you choose to require a condition for BREEAM Excellent, and I'm not advising you not to do so, but I am advising you that it may be difficult for the applicant to comply with that condition without fully taking down the building and also carrying out other measures which may require certain amounts of redevelopment within the scheme. Those measures could potentially render the scheme unviable, and consequently there could be some vulnerability to an appeal of that condition, deeming it unreasonable. But on that respect, I would also state that the works are, of course, in their current state, unauthorised. The applicant has carried out those works at their own risk. So on that double-edged sword of advice, members, I'll leave to your considerations.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up for us. Right. Well, I think that's enough with the clarification. Let's move on to debate. So you're going to kick us off, Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you very much.
Just before we begin, can we avoid making proposals one way or the other within at least the first two parts of the debate? I would like to have debate before we make proposals, please. Thank you.
I wasn't quite going to go there, but
just in case.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick up really, I'll kick off with Councillor, he still is Councillor, James Cole's point earlier on. The only reason we're discussing this evening, members, is because it was called in by a ward member with genuine concerns, and this is a classic case. I think this is a classic case of member interaction with the parish council and the applicant, and coming to the right answer. And sadly, the mechanism for withdrawing the call-in doesn't exist. Once the call-in's made, the process has to roll on, and we find ourselves here this evening. If that call-in hadn't been made, this would have gone through by delegated decision. I'll leave that there. I'll sit back, enjoy the debate and take part and see what happens. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as the portfolio holder for planning, I've taken notes of that very point. I think we need to review that position, because particularly now when we're short of planning officers and we're being advised to call in before there's even a case officer to discuss matters with, there is a tendency to just call in applications as a precaution. And then once you've got a case officer, you're quite happy, but you've done the call in and it can't be withdrawn, which is just giving this committee more work, which is necessary. I mean, delegated powers are there for a reason. So I think we do need to look at that, but that's not really for tonight. That's for my discussions with officers outside of this room. but I'm glad that that was brought up by both my predecessor and my fellow ward member, Councillor Bennyworth. Moving on though, Chairman, I've been very pleased with what I've seen on the whole. I'm not happy with retrospective, but I do think there's a very good excuse, if you like, why it's happened to happen. You know, we've had COVID, we've had the rating industry with problems. We want to see recovery of all our industries post-COVID. And while it was at his own risk, I think the applicant understandably proceeded, but I think he kept in conversations with officers, and that's why we've had all these amendments. And we've got to a state where what you look at now is very hard to object to. I think we should, given that it was retrospective, or that a lot of the work is retrospective, I do think, I agree with you, Chairman, that we should include a CS15 clause. It's quite an open area. I'm not an expert in CS15, but it allows a number of different ways to assemble a sufficient score to pass the necessary excellent test. And I think it should be possible to achieve. And if it isn't, well, the applicant can always come back and try and change that condition. I think I'm right. Officers will correct me if I'm not. But having said that, I'm very happy with the application as I saw it.
Thank you. Anybody?
Can I just reinforce Mr. Till's view that I think it's almost impossible to get an excellent BREEAM score on something that's already virtually constructed. We've been through this before on other projects. So whilst I'm highly supportive of CS15 and the need to have BREEAM, I suspect a slightly lower rating rather than excellent might be more appropriate.
Don't bear with me 1 second, will you? Thank you. I was just looking at or getting clarification on the suggested amendment to the, if we were minded to approve. And I think I'll be led by the rest of the debate. By all means, go ahead now, and if anybody wants to make a proposal. But Councillor Codling.
I was going to ask the question, is there something lower than an excellent rating? Because as I understand it, BREEAM is incredibly difficult to achieve excellence on an already built building. Yes, it's sad that it's already been done, but actually the buildings look quite high quality, high spec. So I'm not sure we can ask for that retrospectively to happen.
Well, we can certainly ask for it. No, because this was done at the owner's own risk.
Whether it's achievable is another matter.
Indeed. Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, members, I mean, I think it's very sad that we are in a position tonight of discussing this as what's already been said by many members, including the ward members. But we are where we are, and we've got to accept it, and that's the position, unless, as Councillor Vickers says, that it's going to be reviewed in future. And I wonder how many similar situations are in the pipeline that could end up coming forward. And it's perhaps something that Councillor Vickers will have to need to address outside this forum.
Okay.
But I think I've heard enough tonight to convince myself that I should be happy with supporting this particular application. And I'm not looking at CS15 as a red line, and I think in the case of what Councillor Codlin's just said, I think the situation could well be different if it was a case of a totally new application. But in the case of basically retrospective, I think that we've got to give a little bit of leeway here, and I wouldn't be strongly advocating that as a firm condition, but I definitely will be supporting the application tonight.
Okay. I just, if I may take Chairman's privilege for a moment, I think I'm slightly nervous of this only because of two things. The CS15 has been in play for a long time, so anybody bringing any proposal forward before it was well before 2019 that it was on the books. So this is not new news, and anybody doing anything could easily have just read the rules and followed them. And I'm very nervous about Natural England having an objection, which we've already been told that this is an unusual situation. So whoever is minded to do what in a second or two, please have that in your mind, and please think about the conditions that are associated with whatever you'd like to propose. And may I have a proposal one way or the other, please? Councillor Wollaston. Oh, sorry, Councillor Culber. One last thing, Alison.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We know that we have policies to support local employment and to support the racing industry. And I'd just like to thank the speakers that have come this evening, because I know it's not the most easy of experiences to go through. So thank you very much for that. I just want to make the point, I mean, obviously we never know what decision we would have made with this if we had made it originally before it became retrospective. But I would just want to put on the record that it does make our lives very, very difficult as members if we have these retrospective things coming through. We had something in the Lambourne Valley where they already had permission and then they cut down some woods. I know that another race owner has done a pre-app and asked for an American barn and been told no. And I know that we're not here to compare and contrast, but I'd just like to put on the record, it makes our lives as members extremely difficult if we are not able to clearly explain to the public why decisions are made in a certain way and why we appear to adopt different attitudes towards different applications. And my concern when it comes to the AONB is that the American barn is very, very large. It's 3 times the footprint of the existing building. And I respect the fact that they want to have all the horses under cover. But we have had debates before about very, very clear debates about keeping the same footprint. We had some residences. I remember there was one application in the ONB and we discussed in detail about how we didn't want those residences when they were rebuilt to be any larger than the current footprint. And we were very, very clear about that. So I just want to put that on the record. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I think you're describing a third reason why we might have looked at this differently if we weren't looking at it in retrospect. But anyway, Councillor Wollaston. So.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that we accept officer's recommendation and provide or give approval.
Do you wish to put any conditions before we find a second or move on to the vote?
Obviously, we have the conditions already proposed by officers.
Including the supplementary ones?
By which you mean the
CS15?
I would be supportive of the CS15 as a proposal, but not at excellent.
Not as a, sorry, I didn't
not at excellent level. I don't think it's achievable.
One moment, please. I'm just going to, I was just going to do that. So I'm just going to ask for a quick explanation on something on the chat we were just having. So.
Chairman, Councillor Wollaston, there are other BREEAM standards that can be complied with. There's BREEAM good, there's BREEAM very good. The difficulty here is that we don't have any actual evidence to demonstrate what standard of compliance could be achieved. My suggestion in this case is that a condition could delegate to officers the requirement for submission of evidence to demonstrate what level of BREEAM compliance has been achieved and what measures can be taken in order to improve that level of BREEAM compliance. And then the building shan't be occupied unless otherwise agreed in writing until those measures have been taken.
I'll be happy with that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vickers, are you willing to second this, or we're up?
Well, I am happy to second it, but I know that Councillor Hooker had his hand up first, so.
Okay.
Oh,
were you?
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to second it. I have one further question. which I don't think.
Well, okay, in that case, can I go to councillor Hooker because he has.
Well, it's to do with a condition, really. But yeah,
Okay,
you can go first.
Okay,
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, before I say anything, I've got to say I am most supportive of the racehorse industry. And in fact, our policies say that this council supports the racehorse industry. And in my previous ward, which is now looked after by Councillor Culver, and the ward that I am in now, both have racehorse stables. And not to be embarrassing, but the racehorse industry is suffering slight pain at the moment. And certainly some of these stables are looking for diversification and development to help them go forward and survive, as we have heard today, Mr. Durham has. Now, along those discussions, as Councillor Culver has said, they've hit the buffers, mainly because, as in the agricultural industry, barns aren't big enough to put tractors in. Barns aren't big enough in the agriculture to put combine harvesters in. And the same with the racehorse industry. The way they want to go is American barns. And I know I keep harping on this, but there's been, I feel, an unwritten policy in this council that we do not support American barns in the AONB. Now, I'm just concerned, and for us to consider a precedent being set here, that stables, let's say, that are struggling, quietly go and put up an American barn, 2/3 the size of knocking down a hay barn, put it towards this committee, and we have the same discussions we've had tonight, and it goes through. Now, if we can have an understanding that we're sympathetic to American barns in the AONB going forward, then I'd be very happy. But it's going to be very difficult, certainly for myself, and I think my colleague on my left, to support this application purely on the American barn issue, when for the last 7 years, I've been a councillor, and 4 of those I've been trying to help stables survive with the design and build and placement of American barns, all to no use. And when I look at policy C19, seeks to conserve and enhance the functional components of the landscape character and environment, particularly with regard, as should be given to the location, fair enough in this case, but then we come to scale and design. Now, those 2 issues, I can't see how they've been achieved. The scale is 2/3 bigger in that particular case, and the design is one of which we don't support. So that, to me, is a concern. If this goes through and the precedent is set, I'm sure those stables in my ward and my colleague's ward will be very pleased. And hopefully they can go forward and take their business forward in the same way that this applicant has gone through. Let's remind ourselves, no pre-app, no discussion, no outline planning permission. We sit here today to look at a large retrospective application that is being built complete. To be honest, the only things that are missing is a bit of the gallop, some landscaping and hardscape and horses. This is finished. This application is finished. And we have got a fait accompli. Are we going to say yes? I think we are. But just be mindful of where we're going with this on other applications. This is a planning committee.
Councillor Hooker, obviously we were going towards a proposal a second ago.
I think,
if you don't mind to curtail you a little bit, I think Councillor Till would like.
I think I need to make my case, and it shouldn't be curtailed.
I understand, but I think I'm very clear on where you're. Of course, you will get to vote with whichever way you wish shortly. Councillor Till does want to make a comment here as well, I believe. Mr. Till, not Councillor Till.
Thank you, Chairman, and for the elevated status. Councillor Hooker, I appreciate what you're saying, and as I am responsible for administering the council's policies in the western part of the district and overseeing consistency, I can understand the concerns that you've raised. What I have to say is each application has to be treated on its own individual merits, and there is no blanket policy of not approving American barns in the AONB. There is, however, a consideration in terms of the impact of the land on the landscape character of the AONB. And I'll refer you to the update sheet, Councillor Hooker, where the considerations in respect of the AONB are outlined here. That we did consider a landscape visual impact assessment that officers agreed with the conclusions of. Part of the basis of that was the interaction of the relationship with the barn in terms of the farmyard complex of buildings as it was existing prior to any of these works being undertaken. I can confirm that in this particular case, and because of the particular constraints of this site, irrespective of the fact that these works were undertaken already and the application is now retrospective, at a stage where the works hadn't been undertaken, your officers had a sight of this and were satisfied in terms of the works proposed as far as design and impact on the AONB was concerned. Moving outside of this application to other sites is strictly not the business of the committee tonight, but your officers will be happy to provide you with views on consistency in terms of other sites if you wish to raise this outside of this meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so we've definitely gone back into debate now. And I had thought we'd ended that. So I have Caroline, can we please now be
just on
very
conditions.
brief?
Yeah, it was just on conditions,
please.
Chairman. Thank you very much for indulging me. We've got a condition in there about bat roosts, but I can't see one about barn owls. We've got something in about reptiles as well, which is very good. But can I just clarify, we have got a barn owl condition in there, please? Because we did find that when we did a survey that there was a box that was being used. Thank you.
We'll come back to that in a second, once we've looked it up. Councillor Vickers, then Councillor Bennyworth.
Yeah, I mean, have we got a seconder? I'm not quite clear, but I was prepared to second having.
You know, this is where I'm trying to wrap up this.
Well,
It seems to have been a second round of debate.
I am actually very grateful for that latest interchange because I think what Mr. Till said really clarifies the matter very well. And I kind of referred to it in my introductory remarks by saying that I've been all around that site and it wasn't clear what was being built, and yet that American barn was there. So it wasn't intruding into the landscape. And I think it's on a case by case basis that we do that. But I don't want to repeat any
Final
more.
word for Mr.
I would
Bennett,
just
Councillor Bennyworth.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. And I will be very brief. Again, thank you, Mr. Till, for clarifying with the American barn. I'm very happy to support this and maintaining a strong rural economy. And I'd just like to remind members that racing is something that we do very well in this part of the world. It's very important to this part of the world. We have the Royal Ascot meeting taking place at the moment. We had two winners.
Don't think, Councillor Bennett, we
yesterday.
are drifting off into just a sort of statement here. Councillor Wollaston, last we left with you saying you were happy with the amended suggestion on CS15.
Correct, Chairman.
Are you still happy with?
I am, Chairman.
Okay, we made a note of that.
I'm happy to add the barn owls as well.
And we were looking up the barn owls. Are you happy? Are we?
Just return to some of the comments.
Okay, so I would like summary of the conditions that we're adding first, which Mr. Till will do shortly, including barn owls.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, on the matter of barn owls, condition 29 for the biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, point A, actually requires consideration to be taken of barn owls. And in respect of additional conditions, members have proposed a condition that requires the applicant to submit evidence of what BREEAM measures have been complied with up to the current point of construction in respect of barn 4, and to specify what additional measures are possible and not to take into occupation that barn until those measures, as approved by delegation to officers, are carried out.
Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Wilson?
Yes, Chairman.
Is there, and I think Councillor Vickers, you seconded it?
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did second it. I'm
also-
happy with it. Yes.
You're happy with that as well. So we are going to move to the vote. So all those please in favour of officer's recommendation for approval, which is, I believe, what we're going for here with the, sorry, hang on a second. And the 106. And I mustn't forget the 106.
Subject
So-
to conditions.
Subject to the condition. Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. All the conditions that are outlined in the papers. Call those in favour, please show their hands. Okay, let's have a look. Have you got that? All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, I believe that passes. So yes, you have your permission with conditions. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that was an hour and a half. So yeah. Does anybody need a rest before we move on, or can we move on to the second? Which is a reason I ask is I suspect the second one will also require some debate. So nobody wants a break before we do it? Okay, off we go then. So thank you very much. Let me turn to the right page. So which officer is Jan, isn't it this time? Okay, so are we all ready? So I'm going to ask the officer to look at this or present this presentation to that, and the officer is Jan Klutz this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just get the screen to share. Okay. There we go. Sorry, I've missed the site address. This application is for Harefield House and the Gables in Upper Eddington. This application is seeking to vary condition 13 of the planning permission for the two houses which have been built on the site. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. There we go. Right, sorry, here's the application site. This is for the two houses which are built on the site, which is known as the Gables and Harefield House, located in Upper Eddington. There is a detailed planning history of this site, which is set out within your officer's report. I will move down to photographs of the site. The houses have been constructed without complying with the conditions which required that any contaminated land on the site is removed in accordance with the previously approved environmental investigation reports. There are deposits of lead which have been identified within the site. When the development was taking place, the remediation works were not completed. Fraudulent verification reports were submitted, and the developer is now serving a custodial sentence as a result. The condition was never discharged. This application is seeking a variation of the condition so that the development can be regularised and remediation works to remove the lead contamination within the site can be undertaken in an approved manner. A remedial method statement and discovery strategy has been prepared by RSK and which has been submitted, and this sets out the remediation strategy for dealing with the contamination which has been found on the site. It sets out an implementation plan and a verification process once the works on site have been completed, and the report also sets out the working practices for the site. The proposed remediation is to remove the garden soil to a depth of 0.6 metres below ground level, and the soil beneath the driveways is also to be removed. These soils are to be stockpiled on a geotextile membrane, tested and disposed of to a suitable licensed landfill or treatment facility. The site will then be restored with the laying of a geotextile membrane across the garden and landscape areas at a level of 0.6 metres below ground level within the garden and landscaped area, with a depth of 0.9 metres for tree pit areas. There will then be certified soil laid over these areas. Certified imported stone and soil will be laid beneath the driveway and drainage. All certification of soils and stones will be checked by the environmental consultant on site. And there will also be in situ testing of the soil. In terms of the consultations on the application, Hungerford Town Council were consulted on the application and they've made no representations. Environmental Health were also consulted on the application and have said that the remediation proposals for the gardens, soft landscaping, patios, drainage and driveways are sufficient in order to break or remove the potential pollutant linkages. Once complete, a detailed validation and verification report will be required in order to demonstrate that all remediation specifications have been completed in full, along with any additional contamination that was discovered as part of the remediation works. On the representations, there were 8 contributors, 7 objected to the proposal and 1 was impartial. The comments have been summarised within the report and have also been made available on the website. The main issues identified are concerns about the remediation proposal which has been submitted, how to ensure that contamination doesn't spread to neighbouring gardens, concerns about the detailed errors and omissions within the RSK report, drainage on the site, alterations to ground levels, the maintenance of boundaries and privacy in ground levels, concern about parking for construction vehicles, noise, dust, storage and general nuisance during remediation works, the airborne pollution risks, view that the proposals do not go far enough, and disappointment about how the way the site has been handled. As we move to the appraisal part of the report, in considering this application, the main issue to consider is whether the remediation scheme as outlined in the report submitted with this application and prepared by RSK provides a satisfactory remediation scheme for the site. The local plan policies and NPPF guidance as outlined in the officer's report seek to ensure that pollution of the environment is prevented and that land which is contaminated should be remediated so that after the remediation works are complete, the site is no longer considered to be contaminated. In reaching your officer recommendation, we have noted the public representations made and the advice that we have received from your environmental health officers who are aware of the site. And the advice that we have received is that the remediation proposal for the gardens, soft landscaping, patios, drainage and driveways are considered to be sufficient in order to break or remove the potential pollutant linkages. Once this work has been carried out, a detailed validation and verification report will be required in order to demonstrate that all remediation specifications have been completed in full, and that any additional unforeseen contamination that may be discovered as part of the remediation works are also included. The remediation statement sets out what the steps are to ensure that the correct verification measures are provided at the appropriate stages. Members, you will see that within the list of recommended conditions, condition number 12 requires that the remediation works are carried out in accordance with the proposed remediation scheme proposed by RSK, and that there is a verification report which is submitted and approved by the planning authority. As a Section 73 application, it is necessary to reimpose any relevant conditions that are still in effect. And so we are requiring that ground levels are maintained in accordance with the previously approved plans, as well as the reinstatement, if required, of approved boundary treatments. Neighbouring residents have also raised concerns about contractors' vehicles, where soil will be stored during the works, and the list of recommended conditions does include the approval of a construction method statement. This application relates only to the remediation works and not to other matters such as the integrity of existing boundaries, as raised by neighbours. Any damage to adjoining property is a separate matter between those carrying out the works and the potentially affected parties. The application is setting out a remediation scheme to deal with the land contamination which was not removed in accordance with the original permission on the site. The remediation scheme and measures for remediation and identification of unforeseen contamination are considered to be acceptable. And with these measures in place, the submitted scheme is considered to accord with policy OVS 5 and also with the advice contained within the MPPF. This application provides the opportunity to provide the appropriate remediation works and rectify the breach of planning control and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in the officer's report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goddard, is Mr. Goddard not here? Won't be coming, we can't make any comments then, can he? No highways issues here. Well, Mrs. Cutts was talking about concerns about parking and so on. So, okay. Next person, I think Mr. Davidson is online, who's our scientific officer. If you'd like to add anything, Mr. Davidson?
All that just to say that I've studied the remediation statement and held several discussions with applicant. In my opinion, the remediation plan is acceptable and will break the pathway between the contamination and receptor. A discovery strategy in place, which will deal with all the any new areas of contamination found, and a validation and verification report must also be submitted afterwards, proving that all the remediation has been completed successfully. I also plan to visit the site regularly to keep an eye on progress with the remediation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I guess on that basis, we are now going to move on to the various speakers we have. And I have up first, Councillor James Cole. Just bear me 1 minute while I get my stall set up. What are you doing?
Good evening again, members. And thank you for letting me speak this time on behalf of Hungerford Town Council. I did 4 years as member for Hungerford and Kimberley, but this site and this set of circumstances is in fact new to me. On the one hand, this mess clearly needs to be sorted out. And on the face of it, the NHBC appears to have accepted it is down to it to do so. On the other side, I read through the objections, which Sian has summarised very well. Of the ones that can be dealt with here as part of this planning application, accepting that there are limits on, for example, what restrictions on timing can be imposed and that interaction with neighbouring properties may be a civil matter, at least in some circumstances, Hungerford Town Council would like to concentrate on things like parking issues affecting local residents and the potential for spread of contamination during works. There is a construction method statement in condition 14 on page 130. We think that there are areas of it that could be beefed up a little, particularly as this will be a long job. We therefore pick out spread of contamination. We ask you to ensure that this statement is adequate to ensure no further spread of contamination as a result of the works. How will potential air contamination be handled while the contaminated earth is removed? It's summertime. The drier the material, the more the potential for spread. Workers' parking, we ask you to ensure that how the parking for workers will be handled should be detailed. I understand that the lane leading to these houses is a car park at night time, and in particular on Saturday mornings. On Saturday mornings when the residents will be in residence and construction workers will be working at the same time. Quite a lot of soil and so on has to go. Please establish how many lorries there will be per day, and if more than one at any one time, how will parking for any lorries waiting be handled? Not in neighbouring properties, we trust. We also have concerns, as do the residents, about residual pollution spread over the years by filtering through the gabion walls. We know that NHBC have verbally told us that they will put in a barrier to prevent further spread. Can this be conditioned? They've said they will. And I ask you a question. One objection comes from a neighbour affected by the gabion wall. He has in effect put the council on notice of the potential severe effects on his property, I suspect also to himself. The council takes the view that any damage to boundaries and neighbouring property during the remediation works is a private legal matter between the relevant parties. However, if an error does get made, and we all hope that doesn't happen, but I do have some lengthy experience in driving a digger, so I know a little of what can go wrong. If an error does get made, and the council has not required everything that it could reasonably have required, how much may the council be liable? Does the council have a complete hold harmless? Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, so I was thinking 1 minute to go, but clearly not needed.
I know how to time this.
Spare minute though. Members, question of the town councillor.
Chairman, I've got a question which you might wish to answer, or you might wish me to perhaps put it forward to another speaker. But you did mention the issue regarding the possible spread of contamination during the actually decontaminating the area. Are you advocating something like a complete encapsulated area? Is that what you're thinking?
No, I genuinely asked a question. I would ask you to ask that of the NHBC. I'm making an assumption that this is not going to be dug by hand, though the principles do still apply. If you take in a small digger, well, I guess that's what's going to happen, hence my comment about digger driving. Imagine you're using a grab and you are lifting. Things drop out of the bucket. I do know, I used to own a digger. It's very hard to stop, even on a wet day, things dropping out of the bucket. Now, imagine a dry day. Imagine that the soil has dried out. Therefore, the pollution in that soil has an opportunity to spread in the air. That's what we were asking about. I'm not offering you a way of dealing with it. Beyond my pay grade, I'm afraid.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any more questions? Nope. That's it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Next on my list, I have an objector, Ms. Leslie Roberts via Zoom. Could she be brought into the room, assuming she is there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Just to remind you, Ms. Roberts, that you have 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning. We don't have any other objectors, so the whole 5 minutes is yours. Away you go.
I think it's a shame and it's not acceptable that adjoining properties aren't protected as part of this application. We have been subject to this before, and the inept abilities of those involved who didn't protect us from the situation there. We have already lost land through this negligence of the builder that was there, and they put boards on the bottom of the fences to negate stuff that was lost. And we were assured, obviously, that everything had been done properly despite their unpleasantness. There isn't a party wall included survey in this, which should be, because if you dig 60 centimetres on our property wall, there is no gabion wall. So I'm not sure how anything will stand up without earth. So we will have that issue on our side. And also the report that was done by RSK, I believe, or I'm led to believe, that no one has visited the site, yet the report that was commissioned by the people in the Gables has a lot more remediation support, and it also reflects the people who have been affected and are still being affected by the work that was not carried out properly by West Berkshire and by this housing company, who did pop round after that meeting only to have a look at what had already subsided, where there is no gabion wall. And I just really would like, if this is going to be approved, it to be noted that there is no care at all being placed on anyone who has been affected by this previously because of what has happened with West Berkshire and this housing people. And also that it really should include a party wall assessment to protect our properties and the council from being liable to what we're going to face, because the report does not take into consideration the effect that will happen on one of the boundaries for us. That's it.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. You had plenty of time. So over to members for question. Councillor Vickers, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I'm presuming you live in the property in Hamlin Meadows that's right next to the Gables. Is that right?
Yes, our property follows it out to the main road.
Yeah. Okay. So we didn't visit you on the site. I poked through a slight hole in the fence and I could see there was a change in level. May I ask, through you, Chairman, whether the levels that we saw, the difference in levels, is to do with any reduction in levels that was made while your properties were being built? And if that was also due, you may not know this, that if that was also due to the same contamination source that is alleged to have affected the site we're talking about.
Yes, it's both, because the gentleman that lives in the Gables actually was part of the decontamination of Hamlin Meadow where we live. So we're considerably lower than these properties because the remedial work was done properly on those occasions.
Thank you for that, because I've read the papers on the file and that's what it appears to say, but you know probably better than me as somebody living there. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? No. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure you'll stay around to watch the rest of our discussion. Thank you. Okay, next we have up the applicants. I have two people that should be here, Miss Gemma Perry and Mr. Simon Langford. Is that correct? Great. You do know that you have 5 minutes. Obviously, that's shared between you. If you'd care to come to the lectern and use as much of it as you wish, but no more.
Just put it down a little bit. Evening, members. Thank you.
Are you ready? Off we go now.
Evening, members. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about NHBC, just so you can understand why we're involved in this. So we're the warranty and insurance provider for new homes. The Gables and Harefield House were registered with NHBC by the builder, Waddington Forbes Homes Limited. We are independent. We've got no vested interest in the properties. Our involvement in all of this is purely from an insurance perspective and to obviously satisfy our policy that's in place. The owners raised a claim with us for contaminated land in 2019. We've accepted that claim as valid under the policy, and remedial works need to be undertaken to resolve this issue. And that's where this planning application comes into play. It's very important to understand that the application that we're looking at today is just for the removal of the contaminated land. There are other claims that have been made with NHBC and remedial works will be undertaken. However, we will deal with those concerns and issues that the fellow residents have separately in the right format. It's again important to understand that we have engaged a professional project team to oversee this, to make sure that everyone's concerns are addressed. We've got obviously RSK, who are our environmental engineer, Abiard and Chu, who was our main consultant, and they're going to project manage. We've got Gareth King, our architect, and Brennan Consultant, which is our structural engineer. Again, all are independent and all have no vested interest in the property. I just reiterate really that our involvement is from the insurance perspective, and our interest is purely just to reach a good outcome for both of the owners affected.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Donny Vickers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perry. I'm not sure whether this, I think for the purpose of clarity for those who might be listening in, whether or not it's strictly a matter for us, but my concern is about any residual liability that either you or they, or you or this council, in other words, we are the council sitting here as members, might have for the way that this application from the very start has been handled. Because what we're facing now is a result of, yes, criminal activity, but also, I've heard is alleged by, inadequate oversight by ourselves and indeed by whoever the builders engaged to do the inspections of the site on their behalf, building control. So my concern, and as somebody who's in the insurance business, you know about residual liabilities, I assume. Have we, in your opinion, as a council, got, I mean, you've admitted you've got some residual liabilities and you've got claims against you, but have we as a council, in your understanding, having dealt with this application tonight, still got some remaining liabilities, for example, to other property occupiers in the neighbourhood? Because as I understand it, in general terms, if it's not common law, might be
Sorry,
even
Councillor Vickers, I'm just losing the relevance to the planning application.
Well,
that
I'm
I know
just
it's
not
an interesting
satisfied.
question, but
Yeah, the question which I'll put to officers, but I'm putting it to the applicants because they are the other party in this matter. There is an applicant and there is the council, which is us,
yes, but
with our legal advice.
We're not in that situation tonight. I mean, you can
But are we
clarify.
able to deal with the matter sufficiently to remove any liability from ourselves?
Is
in
that the
future?
question? So that's the question.
I'm asking the opinion of the, I'm hoping the answer is
the,
yes.
The problem is it's not really anything of clarification that was said other than the word insurance was used.
Well, the applicant did admit that there are some residual claims against them, but
okay.
do we know whether there are claims against us?
Can you give us a one-line answer?
The residual claims aren't to do with the council.
Okay, so you believe that we're not left with any liability. That's very satisfying. If I hear that from you, I'll get it confirmed from our legal advisor as well later.
I'm not sure that's what was said, but I'm going to let Mr. Till step in for a moment.
Members, I think it's important at this juncture that I remind you that we're not here to discuss the council's liability. Should members have queries regarding that matter and the council's own liabilities in this case, then please put those questions to officers outside of this meeting. Similarly, we're not here to discuss the liability of NSBC. We're here to discuss the planning application and the remediation strategy that has been proposed. Matters of land ownership and insurance liability are separate. They are not matters for members to consider tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Till. Any other members? Councillor Culver?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for coming to speak this evening. Can I just clarify, would it be acceptable to you to put some barriers up between these properties and the neighbouring properties during the works to reassure the lady who spoke earlier?
When you say barriers, you mean like temporary fencing, or do you mean temporary
Yeah,
support?
whatever would be suitable.
Well, I can
Yeah.
answer both those points. Firstly, there's a barrier that's going to go on the boundary where the gaping walls are anyway, as part of our remedial solution, our design solution. That's already there to protect any contamination going through further. Secondly, when we do the construction works, the works to the gaping walls will need to be done in sections, and we've got a no construction zone 2 meters away from the fence line. So there'll be no mechanical diggers in that area to influence that fence line. And if necessary, yes, the fence will need to come up to do the construction works, the gabions, but there will be a temporary fence at all times so that they're all protected.
Okay, great. So you'll, are you able to reassure the lady who spoke earlier then there won't be any subsidence into her garden or?
There won't be any subsidence into your garden, because what we have asked the structural engineer to do in their designs is to ensure that our contractor, when they do the works, provide what we call a temporary works design. So that has to go through our engineers to approve, which stops any movement of that gaping wall. And we may well need to put monitoring telltale signs along the gaping wall to monitor that movement. So we'll put them on there before we start, and we'll monitor them weekly to make sure that that wall isn't moving at all.
Okay.
That's how we as a contracting arm, if you like, would monitor that side of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just going to jump in myself. You mentioned gaping wall, but the lady that presented talked about was not a gaping wall. So are you actually saying all the areas that are affected?
Any areas,
just for clarity,
any areas that have got a difference in ground area, we'll make sure that the land isn't disturbed either
Thank
side.
you very much. Councillor Barnett.
I'm going to follow up my earlier question to the parish representative, especially in view of what you were just saying regarding barriers.
Yeah.
I think you used the word barriers several times. But the parish representative, I think, was talking more about the possibility of airborne contamination.
Yep.
And myself and Councillor Hooker are very much aware of radioactive contamination, our past history and our past work environments. And we know quite clearly airborne contamination, irrespective of which type it might be, could transfer in a large area around the mate. So are you considering the possibility of some form of encapsulated area? Is all right barriers, but that's still open to the environment?
No, the RSK report does touch on that subject of airborne pollution, and they recommend before any excavations are undertaken that the area is dampened down with water to ensure that the soil, as the gentleman previously explained, can't lift up into the air before we start excavating, which is quite common practice and will be set out within the construction method statement that we put forward for proposal.
Councillor Benworth.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both for your presentation this evening. You have to forgive my ignorance. Is there any chance that the gabion walls themselves could be contaminated or could have been contaminated over the year?
We haven't been advised of that at this stage, no.
That's all right. Okay, thank you.
No evidence to suggest that.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions from members? No, well, thank you very much for your presentation. I guess we move on. We have 3 ward members, Councillor Dennis Benworth, Councillor Denise Gaines and Councillor Tony Vickers. I see 2 who would like, are you going to share or what's the situation? You are going to share, okay? Obviously, you have 5 minutes. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I did a certain amount of research on this when I first met Mr. Vokins, the owner of the Gables, as I happened to be out there campaigning for the election. And then I've reminded myself just today of the history of the site. I think members might find it useful to understand how we got to where we are today. This is a site that was first given outline approval in the last century. But the first full, I think that the story really begins with 2009, where there was an outline application with no mention of soil contamination in the documentation at all. But then there was one in 2012 where the environmental health did, and it was an officer named of Mark Prickett, I see. I don't know whether he's still with us, who identified contaminated land and drew up a relevant draft condition in his comments, and that was taken on board, and it was condition 21 in that application. And there's a certain amount of confusion in the correspondence you might have seen on file from residents not sure, about the condition numbers that are being referred to. But that's the condition one, goes back to that application. The condition, I think 13 that we're talking about here, that's the subject of this application, is referring to the application of 2015. Now, I wasn't on the council between 2015 and 2019, and that's when the building happened. The first indication that the contractor had not done what he was supposed to do according to that condition was on the 26th of May 2015, when a local resident contacted enforcement, and enforcement action was taken, but it doesn't appear that the builder actually stopped working, because they don't have to stop working until there's a stop notice. And there were a number of appeals then submitted when a stop notice came in, and they were all discharged or dealt with in different ways. And the bottom line is the inspector allowed the building to go ahead, and did not back the council's refusal of that 2015 application. That's where the problem lies. But, there are questions in the minds of a lot of the neighbours, the residents that we now represent, about how the council dealt with it overall during that period. That's why I wanted.
Vickers, can you just hold it for a moment? How are you splitting the time?
I mean, I'm nearly finished, but
I just want because you're halfway exactly. So
yeah. Well, I think I'm probably going to have more than half, because I think I've probably done more of the recent research on this. But
so please carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issues are, and I touched on this in my question to the applicant, and it's strange that we have an applicant who is in fact the person that should have been keeping an eye on the site when it was being built. Because if you're liable to, for insurance of anything that goes wrong, then surely you should be inspecting the site regularly. I don't know how often that happened. Maybe the neighbours do, and some of them certainly do, because they've said on file that they saw things happening that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. Now, that's a problem with building control and the legislation that we have on that at the moment. But the problem I think we're left with, certainly as ward members, is facing a lot of worried residents from Hamblin Meadows and the other side, on the downstream side, where the work that quite rightly I think we're going to have to do now, or the applicants are going to have to do, is going to disturb existing contaminated land, which in the worst case is about 12 times higher than the recommended allowable rates in terms of lead contamination alone. And that's just from two boreholes. So I think we've got to be aware that this is not the end of the story, that a lot has gone wrong. A lot will probably come up again in the newspapers as this work goes on, probably for years, because the people are going to be expected to carry on living in these two houses while this work carries on. Although if they're removed,
because we should allow the other ward member for at least a minute. So
you want to add anything, Dennis?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Vickers. This has been, first and foremost, the last application maybe was one that shouldn't have come to committee. This one, I believe, I called it in. I think it really ought to be here and heard in public. It's been a troubled site. You've heard from Councillor Vickers, and I urge you all to take part in a robust debate, and that will be me, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have 30 more seconds if you like, Councillor Vickers.
Just look at my notes. Yeah, I mean, I've in a recent site elsewhere in the district, I've noted that on a site we own, I couldn't find the wording today, but I looked at it a few days ago, that a landowner and a local planning authority have a legal duty under environmental acts to protect the interests of not just people, future occupiers of their own property, but of neighbouring properties. And I'll just leave that thought with you.
Okay, we had 5 seconds spare there, but never mind. Right, over to members. Any questions of the ward members? Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, no, I'm sorry, I was going to ask a question of the officer, forgive me.
Can we go now?
Excellent, no worries. Any other members?
Resume our seats. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, we now move on to questions for clarification of the officers. So I assume you would like to go first, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, it says in 4.5 that it's going to take 12 months. Is it definitely going to take that long, or are we basically giving them that amount of time to get the job done? Because presumably it's going to take a lot of time and disturbance to the residents there and the neighbouring residents and the people who want to park there, etc. Are we satisfied that it is actually going to take that long to do? Or are we just obliged to give them a certain amount of time? Because it seems like a long time to cause that level of
Are you aiming the question at a particular officer, Councillor?
Whoever wants to.
Just, okay, Sean.
Yeah, sorry.
So I don't think we've actually got details of how long it's going to take. I think we've given them 12 months in the conditions. We've given them 12 months to commence the work. But I don't think they've actually given us an indication of how long it's likely to take.
Okay. Maybe the neighbours would appreciate some kind of indication as to when that might happen. Because I know sometimes we give permission for things and then it doesn't start for ages and people just need to be communicated with. Yeah.
Yeah, we've required them to start within 12 months, but I don't think the report itself has actually set out how long it is likely to take place. I think our important thing is that the correct remediation work takes place. It may be that takes as long as it takes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Cox.
Any other members? Councillor? Please, there you go.
This is purely curiosity, Chair. I'm just wondering how this problem arose in the first place. Like, where did the contamination come from?
Oh, but that was explained at the site visit.
Sorry, I was on holiday at the time, so
I understand. Yeah. Could you take a very quick answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, I think there are some different ideas. It may have been that there was a foundry historically on the site. I think that's what some of the reports have referred to. I mean, in some ways, it's not that relevant. The fact is we've got lead in the site and we need to remediate it. And that's what the important issue is. Russell may have some other information on that as our scientific officer.
Well, this is about cleaning up. So,
yeah, I think
Councillor Barnett, sorry, I skipped by you, didn't I?
That's all right. I'm a little bit concerned because, clearly the representatives from HSBC, and National Housing Corporation, whatever it used to be. How are they going to, how are we going to be in a position to be able to enforce and make sure appropriate operation takes place by the contractors to make sure that affected residents, as well as the decontamination of the site, is made good without affecting other parts of the site and other areas? Because, I have some concern that are we in a strong position to be able to dictate what really can be undertaken in the decontamination process?
Which officer would like to take that question?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start on this. The details submitted in terms of the remediation schedule give us a schedule of works that will need to be undertaken in terms of remediation. There is a construction management plan condition that is recommended in respect of these works as well. You've heard from Hungerford Town Council that there are aspects, particularly control of dust, I would suggest that might be strengthened in that construction management plan condition. Also, potentially members may want to seek details in respect of movements of vehicles and parking of vehicles and the actual elements of construction activities, the schedule of construction activities to take place on the site. Those are matters that can be secured by condition. In terms of enforcement involvement, planning enforcement are aware of this site and the need to undertake remediation works. And we have an environmental health officer who's present at the meeting tonight who has had prior involvement with this site and has undertaken to carry out monitoring. And I have confidence in that undertaking that West Berkshire Council Environmental Health Service will undertake to closely monitor as remediation operations are undertaken. But in addition to that, should we be concerned that remediation operations are not being undertaken in accordance with the details submitted and the construction management details submitted, then we do have recourse to the involvement of enforcement officers to take various measures in order to enforce that those things do occur. I should mention that I realise that the history of this site is troubled and that there has been prior planning enforcement involvement that has already been mentioned. I'm not privy to what that enforcement involvement was. I wasn't involved in it, but I have full confidence that the planning enforcement team, where necessary, will become involved in order to enforce that the construction measures that we specify within an approved plan would be carried out as per the approval, that monitoring would take place because, as has rightly already been mentioned by the ward members, there is a certain high profile element to these works. And in addition to that, I would say that it is your officers' every wish that the local residents are protected and that the mitigation works are carried out in a satisfactory manner to ensure the ongoing environmental protection of these local residents. That is of utmost importance to us. So you have that assurance from me as one of your officers and from your team of officers members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just before I go on to Councillor Bennyworth, a mention was to include a party wall assessment. Is that something officers can get on board with? Is it not necessary? Well, where do we stand with that?
Thank you, Chairman. Party wall legislation is different legislation to planning legislation. We shouldn't venture into that territory. However, no doubt, in order to carry out the works appropriately, an SBC will be required to comply fully with party wall legislation as they're carrying out the works.
Okay, so I wrote something else down here, protecting neighbours, and I was looking for an officer comment on the council's powers in this area as it applies to this particular application. Do you think, is there anything you'd like to add, or do you think you've already said?
I think that in respect of protection for neighbouring properties, I've suggested that there are some additional measures that could be added to the construction management condition that officers have recommended. However, in respect of any additional off-site contamination, any concerns regarding off-site contamination, airborne contamination can be addressed in terms of dust management added to that construction management plan. I would ask Russell Davidson, the Environmental Health Officer, to comment in reference to the mitigation plan as far as any off-site contamination is concerned before I go on if necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
In that case, would Mr. Davidson care to make any comments on about what we are discussing at the moment?
My only comment would be with regard to potential of soil being or contamination being washed through gabion walls. I have my doubts with regard to that comment, and basically due to the very low solubility of lead and its relative immobility in soil and very slow leaching. The bioavailability of lead is also highly variable. So I have my doubts that soil and contamination is leaching through gabion walls. However, it may be prudent to undertake some sampling on that side, just to make sure.
So would you be recommending a condition to that end then?
Well, the condition would still fall within remediation of the site.
Okay, thank you. Bennyworth, I saw your hand up.
And I would also say a verification and validation report have to be submitted and approved, basically showing that all the remediation has been carried out effectively and appropriately before any conditions will be discharged. So if something has not been done properly, then the condition will remain, and further discussions will take place in order to get that work properly undertaken.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bennyworth.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that. That slightly answered my question. I just want to ask the question: Does the red line on the application denote the extent of the contamination monitoring?
In this particular case, I would suggest that it doesn't have to. The environmental health officer has to be satisfied that adequate monitoring has been undertaken. And if that relates to monitoring being undertaken off-site, he can require that as part of the verification report in order to confirm that off-site leaching of the contaminant hasn't occurred, or if it has occurred, then further measures will need to be proposed to address it. And that is all covered under the requirements of the condition.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers.
It's a similar question. It may be that it's Mr. Davidson or Mrs. Mayer that has to answer this. But the case officer in her report referred, and it says in her written report too, that we're only looking here at removing contamination within the site, and yet the contamination has for up to 7-8 years, because we know that work actually started in 2015. And from the moment that contractors started messing about with the soil on this site, it has been liable to move faster than it would otherwise move. It was there all the time, and that's nothing to do with us as an authority. It's a civil matter between whoever worked on that site and dumped whatever's causing the contamination and the neighbours who are affected by it. But my concern is that by working in the way we're doing, and I'm not saying I'm against what we're being asked to approve today, in all that time since 2015 and from now on until we've discharged this condition, if not beyond, can we require the applicant to undertake works to prevent or to mitigate the harm that is going to carry on happening to other properties? Or are we only interested in what happens to these two properties that are within the red line? That's my question.
I think probably I'm best placed to start with an answer to that at least. I believe, and Russell will correct me if I'm wrong, that essentially this application is a starting point for identifying the contamination that has been associated with the site. If off-site contamination is identified, there may be a larger case for further decontamination works taking place. But I think that would fall under the premise of environmental legislation that Russell probably has more expertise in than I do. So if I could pass you over to Russell for a view on that, please.
You're on mute, Mr. Davidson, please. Could you unmute yourself?
Apologies, Councillor. The remediation is specified to take place on site, and it's quite acceptable methodology on what they are proposing. They are proposing, I believe, a barrier to go up against gabion walls to prevent any potential for further contamination to come through. And as I said, it may be prudent to take some samples on the other side just to make sure that site is clean and no contamination has come through.
I guess I've heard that word prudent a couple of times, and yes, I think it would be prudent as well. But what I want to be clear on is, do we have the powers here at this committee to actually enforce something like that as a condition or anything, or is it not within our remit?
Chairman, I think we would be stepping outside of the remit of this committee in order to seek to condition works outside of the application site. The planning application does relate to a specific area. So apart from meeting the requirements of the mitigation strategy as specified with the verification report, which may require off-site sampling to be done, it's not possible for this committee to consider wider works outside of the site.
Can we at least make a recommendation to the relevant body to get on with it and wait and condition them to wait for that report before this goes forward? Or not? Ponder that why I bring in Councillor Hooker.
Yeah, I go back to Councillor Barnett's point of land remediation, which we've been involved in one way or another over many years, and I'm sure Russell will back me up on this. But you always start with a survey to know what you're dealing with to start with, both of the area you're doing and the areas that you could affect should something go wrong. You do need a baseline, because if you don't have something like that, and Mrs. Neighbour, who's obviously concerned of what's going on, comes along afterwards and says, well, you've contaminated my land, and the insurance company will turn around and say, oh, no, that was there before we started. So we didn't contaminate that. That was already there. So I think how we deal with this, as you say, is tricky, but in real terms of setting the baseline as to before the work starts and ensuring you don't contaminate, you have to do a survey of that area to say it's clean before I start, and then you survey after they finish, and if it's contaminated, you can say, yes, you've contaminated it. But how we deal with that, I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you have a chance to ponder that there, Mr. Till?
Thank you, Chairman. I think that the request is venturing into the territory of matters outside of this planning application. The application deals with the specifics of dealing with contamination via the remediation report of this site. That may take into account any off-site leaching that has occurred. We will look in terms of verification at that matter. But should that be found to have occurred, that's likely to be a private civil matter between the owner of the land concerned and the NSBC.
I'm just going to ask I'll ask the legal officer on the mic and on record. If I do I have the ability to suspend standing orders for a moment and ask the applicant the question about doing this? We can't condition it by the sounds of it within this particular, but they are in the room. Can I suspend standing order, ask them the question, then reinstate standing orders to try and move whether or not they will do some checking on the existing state of contamination in neighbouring properties before moving ahead? Well, exactly. It's out of the room, so hence the suspending of standing orders. So it goes outside this meeting. Well, to get no, but it will. The people listening would have the sense of whether they are willing to cooperate or not. If the legal tells me I can't, and the officers tell me it's not within our powers, then we'll move on. But okay. So sorry about that one. We're going to have the process means we're going to have to move on. Okay. Very interesting. Any more clarification of officers before we close this bit out? In which case, that's rush into debate. Who would like to start off, please? Councillor Vickers, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As you heard from Mrs. Roberts confirming, there have been changes of level in the Hamlin Meadows area, which, according to the case file, which I read today, was the subject of a prior application, which was the site of I think I've got the name of the company somewhere I noted down, but it was a fertilizer works, Fertiliquids, I think, and it was heavily contaminated. And one of the occupiers of these two houses that we're talking about now was actually involved with that construction site. And it's notable that they removed all the soil before they got on with the building. Now, where we are tonight, with what we're discussing is because this builder didn't, and he's in prison. He's going to, do his time quite rightly, but we are left with things that are going to require compensation, I believe, over many years from residents in this area as a result of the way in which that contractor went about it. I'm satisfied after listening to the debate and listening to officers and others that we've probably got to approve what we're being asked to approve, but it's not going to be the end of the story, and it's not going to satisfy a lot of people, probably not even the two occupants of the site. But it's a mess, and we have to do something to try and start clearing it up.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Anybody else like to add to the debate, please? Councillor Hooker.
It's not really a debate, Chairman. It's just a bit of history. I was on the council in 2015 when this application came up, and I vividly remember visiting this site and then the enforcement notice being made after our visit. And as I remember, and it is going back a bit, the reason that this came to committee was that I think somebody had complained that the houses were being built effectively too high. And of course, I don't think I remember anything about land contamination when we went on that site. And although this is being looked at to be removed at 0.6 metres, something comes to my mind that there should have been at least a foot or 1'6" removed from that site before the housing build started. And that wasn't done. And that's why it came to committee, because effectively the houses were built 1.5 feet too high. They should have taken the soil off first and put that down. And that's what actually happened. As you know, it went to appeal and the inspector turned it over, and the development continued, and we are where we are today. Had that have been stopped and looked at and said, I think, as I remember, they were sort of up to almost the wall plate level when we went round there. And the site was in a terrible state. I mean, we were allowed on with no PPE, no shoes, no helmet. And it was from that site, in fact, that the council actually started insisting on site meetings that we wear protective gear. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Vickers. On that construction site, it was going, people were puddling in and out, lorries were going in and out, and goodness knows what went down the road and beyond from it was an absolute quagmire, as I remember that site. But I just bring that up as history.
Councillor Alston, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. This is clearly a very sorry tale and history, and I feel deeply sorry for the residents. But we are where we are, and I think the best thing we can do is probably to try and push through remediation as soon as possible.
Is that a proposal from yourself, Councillor?
I'm happy to make a proposal, yes.
Happy to second that.
Okay. I have a proposal and a second. Before we move on to the vote, are there any additional conditions that you would care to try and add? Councillor Codling.
One of the comments from Councillor Cole from the Parish Council was about the vehicular movements and having, is there likely to be more than one vehicle at a time, large vehicle at a time and things like that? Is there something that we can condition so that it mitigates the residents there?
Is some kind of works plan in place to deal with that? Do you mind if I just quickly check with the officer?
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Codling, the condition 14 for the construction method statement actually is where I would focus your attention in respect of that. Now, in addition to the measures that are specified in that, matters that have been raised earlier on in this meeting in questions to officers included management of parking and management of construction vehicles through the course of remediation, management of construction works through the course of remediation, and measures to control airborne dust. Members, if you were so minded to amend that condition to include those measures, those are matters that I've picked up from the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Till. I didn't really want to go back into debate, Councillor Barnett, but so is this?
It was actually just to follow on from Councillor Codling, because I don't know whether we have actually considered it and I've overlooked it, but in relationship to disposal of any contaminated material, there should be appropriate method of routes of where they're actually going on the highway, and also to approved disposable disposable sites. So can we condition something like that?
Well, my understanding is that certainly the disposal has to go into a licensed site, but is there the route to the site conditionable?
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Councillor Barnett, the route in terms of any off-site traffic, any vehicles transporting that waste would be a matter that we couldn't condition because it is a private vehicle owner's responsibility. It would be very, very difficult to enforce that matter. We can, for instance, place an enforcement officer on the corner of the road permanently to make sure that they're turning right instead of left. We could recommend that as part of the remediation strategy, a vehicle routing plan is provided and that contractors working on the site are recommended to comply with that plan if members were so minded to do so. And in respect of the waste facility, yes, it would have to go to a waste facility with the appropriate environmental permits for disposal of that waste.
So, Councillor Orlinston, I believe you proposed. So, are you comfy with what the officer has said in terms of additional conditions?
I am, Chairman.
Okay. In that case, just before we go there, I'll make a small statement. I think I hope everybody's clear that we are doing what we can within the powers that we have. We could debate about whether we'd like more, but we're doing what we can within the powers that we have. So can we go to the vote now, please? All those in favour of accepting officer recommendations with the existing conditions noted and the new ones added by Mr. Till just now. All those in favour? Well, that's everybody. Oh, sorry. No, I'm pretty sure that was everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Yep, the works will be undertaken. So we have one final application today. Thank you for the members of the public who attended the previous one. Councillor Hooker. Okay, so we're moving on. Does anybody need a restroom break? Gosh, aren't we all in good fit condition? All right, hopefully this next one will be less controversial. So I believe, which is the officer? I do apologise.
I'll be presenting.
You're going to present it, right? Okay. So we're getting the most senior man in the room presenting to us now, Mr. Simon Till.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if you could just bear with me if I take a second to reassemble my notes after that last item before I begin presenting. I'll be with you very shortly.
Okay. Water break, anybody? I'm taking one second. Okay, so as we've now got people leaving the room, I'm going to suspend the meeting for a rest break. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. Thank you very much, Officer. Now we're on to the third and final application for the evening. Oh gosh, I've lost my notes now. It's not that one, it's not that one. It's no, land south of Priory Road, Hungerford, is that? That's right, that's the right one, isn't it? 22/02695, etc. And Mr. Till is going to treat us to an informative.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope.
Thank you very much. As this is purely a change to a legal contract, I'm sure that's why we don't have representative from Mr. Goddard. So I think, therefore, unless there's any other officer that we would want to speak, is that, can we move on? I believe we can. Yep, I'm not getting any objections to that. So we're going to go on to Parish Council and Mr. Cole, Councillor Cole, sorry, I do apologise, you're back up again.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening once again, members. Hungerford Town Council thanks the Development Control Manager for calling this application in, us permitting the decision on this to be confirmed in public. We don't pretend expertise in clauses like this. We have asked someone with legal experience, and their view is this change is probably acceptable. But we ask you, members, to satisfy yourselves specifically that the 12 shared ownership houses will remain shared ownership come what may. I can't see any reason to say any more. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, close to the fastest ever. I have no applicants, agents. I have ward members next, it appears. Of course, Councillor Benworth, please take yourself to the lectern.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the reason this is before you is because it was clearly called in by those on high. From Hungerford Town Council's point of view, this was mired in legalese and to the layman was not digestible. It needed to come here for wider discussion and clarification and reassurance that the affordable housing provision was just as secure as we hoped it will be. This council takes a very robust view on affordable housing, on greenfield land, and being the planning-led authority that we are, we defend that robustly. And I hope this evening we can take some reassurance that the affordable housing that has been allocated to this site will remain so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Would any members like to ask any questions? No. Thank you very much. Okay, now we move into the clarification from members to the officers. Is anybody? Yes, Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Could I just ask something about page 94, where it's 1.13.2? It talks about disposal within a period of 6 weeks. So is that basically the disposal from one company to another, should it be necessary? Because 6 weeks seems like not a long amount of time. And my second question, if I may, Chairman, there's obviously the new policy now called First Homes, which 25% of affordable homes needs to be first homes and only 5% shared ownership. Will that affect this at all, or because the application received approval before that policy came in, would it not be applicable? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of first homes, first of all, if I can cover that, the first homes legislation was introduced after this legal agreement was drawn up. The deed of variation proposed does not seek to vary the legal agreement in order to address first homes, and there is no reason, as we're not reconsidering the planning permission, we're simply considering an amendment to the legal agreement to retread the first homes issue under this particular amendment. Sorry, Councillor Culver, could I ask you to repeat the first part?
Sorry, Mr. Till. Yeah, 1.13.2 on page 94. It talks about completing disposal arising from such an offer or nomination within a period of 6 weeks. So is that basically the period where company A might wish to pass that housing over to company B, because 6 weeks doesn't sound like a very long amount of time.
So the council would have the opportunity to retrieve the affordable housing and nominate an RP within that 6-week period, is my understanding. Should the council not be able to nominate an RP within that 6 weeks, it would have the option to retrieve the affordable housing itself. There is nothing in this legal agreement that I can see that would then prevent the council from nominating an RP and redistributing to that RP, subject to it being refunded the money that it's invested. But there may be a separate deed of variation required if that situation occurred, which I'm sure, given the circumstances, it would be under, members would be likely to be amenable to, as would your officers.
Okay, thank you.
If I may just ask, it sounds to me as like effectively the council remains as lender of last resort. If all else fails, we can take it on ourselves. So for those members looking for succour in this matter, well, it's up to us anyway. Right, any other questions? Right, yeah, Councillor Vickers.
Yes, having in another, when I was representing another ward, had several of these MDOPO type applications and wondering what they were and seeking an explanation from officers, but not having felt it was necessary to call in. My question is probably, why this one? Why was this called to committee and not the others? It doesn't seem to be that different, but maybe they are in some, you know, technical way, different ones that we're seeing now to what we saw 2 or 3 years ago.
Thank you, Chairman. In reality, Councillor Vickers, there are a number of these similar deeds of variation that have been through the system. There will be similar ones to follow. In most cases, the local parish council, town council haven't raised concerns in respect of them, but that is not to suggest that Hungerford Town Council are not right to have raised concerns in respect of it. And I very much, the comment steeped in legalese very much chimes with me, having spent quite a lot of time familiarising myself with this legal agreement. So in this case, the Development Control Manager took account of the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Bennyworth and by Hungerford Town Council, and it was felt that it was appropriate that members should have the opportunity to hear your officers' views in respect of the changes that were proposed. But yes, mindful of the fact that these are changes that are common to a number of legal agreements throughout the district at the moment in order to allow registered providers to maximise on their borrowing against the affordable units.
Councillor Wilson.
It seems to me this comes down to a straight question as are we disadvantaged as a council at all by this proposed change in terms of the provision of affordable housing?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Williston. I would suggest that one might say we are disadvantaged as a council in that we do represent the last resort in the situation that one of these legal agreements did have to be called into action. However, as I have said, the risk is extremely low. It's generally based on the property investments of large national companies. The risk is also mitigated by the fact that this site would in all likelihood be desirable for other RPs to uptake should things go south for the current RP. In actual fact, moving with the times nationwide, there has been pressure on RPs from their funders to be able to insert this clause in order for them to borrow money. So without agreement of this clause, we are potentially jeopardising the delivery of affordable housing on this site more so than we might be by agreeing the insertion of the clause.
Anybody else? Any other members like to ask? Okay, well, let's dive into debate then, please. Who would like to kick off? Councillor Vickers.
I'm glad this did come in. I just hope we don't have too many of them because, you know, this is a public meeting. I wonder how many of the public are here. I think this could have been dealt with by a letter to the town council and a circular to members to explain us. But I am reassured that officers are looking at these on a case-by-case basis. And that it seems to me, although there is the point you made in answer to Councillor Williston's question, Mr. Till, I think on balance, this sort of thing is of benefit to us to make sure that we safeguard the provision of affordable housing as members wish when our policy is put into effect and we insist on this affordable housing. Because my fear when it came up in my ward, and I just spoke to the housing officer in the break just now, and she agrees with me that members and the public fear that these sort of applications are designed to get developers out of their obligations. And what in fact it is the opposite. And actually, I think I should be going away from this meeting and suggesting that we frame some sort of a press release to say that that is the purpose of this sort of thing, because that will reassure people. And I just think, you know, we need to be glad that officers are keeping their eye on this. And I don't see any reason to not go with officer recommendations, Jim.
Yeah, I'm trying to read the mood of the room here, so I'm quite happy to take a proposal rather than going to a long debate. Is that a proposal, Councillor Hooker, or and Councillor Clark, you're seconding? Let's go to vote then. All those in favour of officer recommendation, and that's it. Clean sweep. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending this evening and helping me through my first chairmanship of a Western Area Planning Committee. I will do better next time. So, on that, I'm going to call the end into the meeting.